The story of America, it's usually told as this epic tale of destiny, right? A nation forged by grand vision and unwavering purpose. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the most powerful country in human history wasn't really built on some master plan, but on just a series of unbelievable accidents, colossal blunders, and pure dumb luck?
No, seriously, just stop and imagine that for a second. In this explainer, we're going to dig into how a wild series of lucky breaks and, frankly, other empires' mistakes created a superpower that, by all early accounts, should never have even existed.
Okay, so let's back up a bit. For more than a century after Columbus, North America wasn't the prize. It was just in the way. You see, all the action, all the gold and silver, that was all happening down south. The Spanish were hitting the jackpot there, and the land that would eventually become the United States, it was seen as this huge, useless obstacle you had to get around to get to the real treasures.
And this right here, this is the first great accident. In 1539, you've got the Spanish, who are basically the world's superpower at the time, sending this huge expedition north. But here's the thing, they were only looking for gold, silver, and spices. They tromped all over what would become the United States, found none of it, and so they just walked away. I mean, they literally looked at the future economic engine of the planet and said, nah, it's worthless, all because it didn't glitter.
So with the Spanish totally uninterested, the door was just left wide open, and eventually the British show up. But they didn't have some grand master plan for a new world. Nope. For them, America was just a side hustle, a distraction from what they really cared about, all the constant wars and power games back home in Europe.
I mean, just look at how fragile this whole enterprise was. The very first English colony at Roanoke, it literally vanished into thin air. Why? Because England was too busy with a war against Spain to even send a supply ship. And fast forward, even after the colonies won their independence, the new nation was a complete mess. Its first government was so bad, the whole country was about to fall apart. This was anything but a sure thing.
And now, this is where the story gets truly wild. The moment that turned the United States from this little coastal nation into a continental power, it wasn't some glorious victory in battle. Oh no, it was a panic sale by a French dictator.
You have to understand how small-time the American goal was here. All they wanted to do was secure their trade on the Mississippi River. That's it. So they sent some diplomats over to France with a really simple request. Hey, can we please buy the city of New Orleans? That was the entire plan, just one city. But Napoleon, well, he had much bigger problems. He was flat broke, he desperately needed cash to fund his invasion of Britain, and he was terrified the British were just going to take his American land by force anyway. So, in this unbelievable move of pure desperation, he makes an offer that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. He says, forget the city, you can have it all.
And the price for all of this land? $15 million for a chunk of land that would literally double the size of the United States overnight. It was, without a doubt, the greatest real estate deal in all of human history. A whole continent on clearance, all because a dictator needed some fast cash.
I mean, this just sums up the accidental nature of this whole story, doesn't it? The Americans went shopping for one port city and came home with half a continent. A single deal, driven completely by drama in Europe, ended up changing the destiny of the United States forever.
And here's the crazy part. The Louisiana Purchase wasn't just a one-time fluke. It actually set a pattern. For the next 100 years, America's growth was fueled less by its own power and more by just taking advantage of the problems, the distractions, and the straight-up blunders of other countries. This pattern just kept repeating itself. Take Mexico. It's newly independent, it's struggling to control all this vast territory it has, and it makes a critical mistake. It invites American settlers into Texas. Well, these settlers, they didn't become Mexican, they stayed American, they quickly outnumbered the locals, and the whole thing just spiraled. It led to independence for Texas, then annexation by the US, and finally a war that cost Mexico a huge chunk of its land. And it all started with a simple invitation. And it wasn't always these huge land grabs either. America was opportunistic about, well, everything. A perfect example? The Guano Island Act. This is a real law, I'm not making this up. It basically said that any American citizen who finds an empty island covered in bird droppings can claim it for the United States. I know, it sounds like a joke, right? But this crazy law was used to claim dozens of tiny islands that turned out to be super important strategic spots down the road.
Now, of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing and lucky breaks. The American experiment came incredibly close to ending right here. The Civil War was just this brutal, self-inflicted wound over slavery that almost tore the nation apart for good. It's a huge reminder that the country's biggest threat wasn't always from the outside. A lot of times, it came from within.
And yet, even as the nation was still healing from that terrible war, the lucky breaks just kept on coming. So Russia owned Alaska, right? But they were paranoid they couldn't defend it from their big rivals, the British. They were also desperate for cash, so they decided to sell, and the United States was the lucky buyer they picked.
For measly $7.2 million, the U.S. picked up a territory more than twice the size of Texas. But at the time, everyone thought it was a huge joke. They called it Seward's Folly, mocking the guy who made the deal. Pretty much all Americans thought they had just paid millions of dollars for a giant, useless block of ice.
Well, they could not have been more wrong. Turns out, Alaska was loaded with resources. We're talking gold, timber, and later, just unbelievable amounts of oil. It was another accidental home run, securing incredible wealth and a super important strategic spot in the Arctic, all for pennies on the dollar.
So as we get to the end of the 1800s, something really important starts to shift. The United States stops just being this passive recipient of good fortune, and it starts actively, and sometimes pretty aggressively, shaping its own destiny on the world stage. The age of accidents was pretty much over. And the real turning point? The Spanish-American War. In just a few months, the U.S. completely dismantled what was left of the Spanish Empire. And yeah, this is the same Spanish Empire that centuries earlier had called North America worthless. This wasn't an accident. This was a rising power flexing its muscles and grabbing strategic territory all over the world.
And man, things just accelerated so quickly after that. The very same year as the war, the U.S. annexes Hawaii to get a key naval base in the Pacific. Then you get Teddy Roosevelt in charge, and the U.S. goes from being just a regional player to a true global force. They even engineered the creation of an entire new country, Panama, just to achieve one single strategic goal.
And what was that goal? The Panama Canal. It was like the final piece of the superpower puzzle. See, Teddy Roosevelt was building this massive, world-class navy, and the canal was the shortcut that would let that navy move between two oceans and project power anywhere. The era of lucky accidents was officially over. The age of the deliberate superpower had begun.
So when you look back at this just incredible chain of events, right? A continent that was ignored, a dictator's desperate panic sale, a neighbor's huge mistake, it really makes you ask a fascinating question. What does it actually mean when the world's most powerful nation is built not on a grand design, but on a foundation of pure, dumb luck? It's really something to think about.